There's one thing Taurus does so well that they don't even realize they're doing it. It's an almost invisible skill, developed over years of experiences that didn't go as planned, of bets that seemed certain but turned out to be too risky, of openings that cost too much. Taurus has learned in a very particular way not to anticipate, not to celebrate prematurely, not to let hope take up too much space before there is concrete proof that it deserves that space. This isn't pessimism, it's precisely the opposite. It's a sophisticated way of protecting oneself from disappointment. And at some point in life, this mechanism becomes so automatic that Taurus doesn't even remember when it was installed. It's simply there, functioning like a second heart. The problem is that this second heart beats to the rhythm of scarcity, even when abundance has already knocked on the door. There's a huge difference between expecting the best and actually receiving it when it arrives. And that difference isn't in the events themselves, it's within Taurus. Because there's a version of Taurus that waits its whole life for a sign that it can open up. And when the sign arrives, it still finds a reason to hesitate. Not for lack of desire, but because the system that was built to protect it wasn't deactivated when the danger passed. It continues running in the background, filtering everything that comes its way. And when something genuinely good appears, it raises an old, almost reflexive question. What if I'm seeing it wrong? What if it's too soon? This voice is not the enemy. It was built at great emotional cost, but there comes a time when the right tool for the wrong situation becomes the problem. And it is precisely in this difference that June 2026 will reside. Not because it will be a lucky month, in the easy and imprecise sense that this word usually carries, but because it will be a month of testing, of confirmation, of return. And Taurus, who knows how to build like no other, who knows how to wait like no other, will need to demonstrate a skill that it has rarely needed to exercise, that of becoming accustomed to what has been built with so much effort without distrusting it. Because there's something Taurus carries silently for years, a belief that rarely surfaces, but operates all the time deep down, behind the scenes of decisions, in the pauses before answers, in the way they evaluate what's being offered. This belief says very simply, when the truly good thing arrives, I'll know it's real. And when I know it's real, I'll be able to fully open myself to it. It seems reasonable. It even seems mature. The problem is that Taurus often fails to recognize its own moment of abundance because it's still operating in the mode that brought it there, the mode of scarcity, of controlled waiting, of prudence calibrated to the millimeter. And the scarcity mode has a subtle but devastating flaw. It makes invisible the evidence that the period of scarcity is over. And that's exactly what makes June 2026 a month unlike anything Taurus has experienced in recent years, because you're going to start delivering proof. Proof that what was built in silence was real, that the choices that seemed timid were actually strategic, that the patience others called slowness was in fact precision. But here's the question nobody asks, the question this entire video exists to answer. When the challenges begin to arrive, when June starts moving in the direction Taurus has always hoped for, will this second heart, this finely calibrated protection system, be able to recognize that the danger has passed? Or will it continue operating as if it still needs to protect itself of something that no longer exists? It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose. It's not a book about astrology in the sense of predictions or monthly trends. It's a book about the deep nature of Taurus, about that internal mechanism built to protect but which sometimes imprisons, about the difference between the security that Taurus builds externally, brick by brick, and the real solidity that comes from within, and that no planetary cycle can shake. It speaks directly to the Taurus who has already built much, has already waited much, and now needs a new language to inhabit what has been achieved without having to calculate once again whether it is safe to do so. You are now at a point in the narrative where something has begun to resonate internally, an unsettling recognition, the feeling that what is being described is true, and that perhaps at other times you have let important things slip by because your second heart was beating faster than your consciousness. This state you are in now, still processing, still recognizing, is the best possible state to make a decision. Not later, when clarity gives way to the everyday routine again. The link is in the first pinned comment, but be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. And before we continue, leave a comment below. Think of a time when something good came your way and you hesitated to believe it was real. What was preventing you from fully embracing that moment, getting back to what matters? There's a concept that astrologers use very frequently when talking about Taurus: patience. It's almost an automatic compliment. But those who are truly Taurus know that's not quite the case. Taurus's patience isn't passive. It's active, calculated, and often exhausting. It's the patience of someone making a real effort not to act prematurely, not to show before being ready, not to release what has been so carefully guarded before being sure it will fall into safe hands. There is a type of farmer, and I say farmer because Tauro understands the land, the cycles, what to plant and what to harvest. There is a type of farmer who prepares the soil with such perfection that the time to plant never arrives. He thinks the soil could still be more fertile, that conditions could still improve a little, that perhaps it's worth waiting another season, and while you're preparing, the cycle passes. Taurus has been that farmer before, not in everything, not always, but in at least one area of life. They know exactly what I'm talking about. A decision that waited for the perfect moment, a conversation that was postponed until the conditions were ideal, a step that was guarded so carefully that the moment when it would make sense ended up closing. The issue isn't judgment. The issue is recognition, because what will be asked of Taurus in June isn't impulsive action. It's the ability to recognize that the ground is already ready, that this is the right season. Waiting another one isn't wisdom. It's a waste. And this requires a level of inner honesty that Taurus has rarely needed to exercise, because Taurus is very good at convincing itself that caution is a virtue, until it isn't. But there's something that needs to be said out loud. Everything Taurus has gone through in recent years, the periods of restriction, the choices that required sacrifice, the moments when it was necessary to say no to things that seemed good because something more important was being built. All of that was not in vain. It wasn't circumstantial. It was planted. There is a tree that spends its first years growing almost exclusively downwards. Its roots reach a depth of 30-40 meters before any sprout appears on the surface. An observer from the outside sees bare earth and thinks nothing is happening. But beneath that earth, a structure so solid is being built that when the sprout finally emerges, no storm will be able to uproot that tree. Taurus was that tree, and June is when the ground will crack for the first time. The question is, will Taurus be prepared to recognize these signs when they arrive? Because here's what nobody tells you about the good months. Most people imagine that a month of opportunities is easy, that things simply appear and you just grab them. But the reality for Taurus in June is different. Doors will open, opportunities will appear, but each one will require Taurus to cross a specific threshold. The threshold of belief, not in a vague spiritual sense, but in the very concrete and human sense of believing that you deserve what is coming, that the achievement is legitimate, that the moment is real, and there's a hesitation that happens right at that threshold. It's almost physical. That moment when an opportunity presents itself, and instead of seizing it, you stand there calculating if it's safe, if it's real, if it will last. While you're calculating, the moment starts to close. This is the pattern that June will repeatedly put in front of you, and what you do with it will determine whether this month will be remembered as the month when everything started to change, or as the month when you were one step away from it. That hesitation on the threshold is no accident, and it's not weakness. It's a code that has been written within you over many cycles, and codes aren't rewritten with willpower. They're rewritten with a deep understanding of one's own nature. The digital book, the divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose, has a chapter dedicated to how Taurus processes deservingness. That deep belief about what is legitimate to receive, what needs to be earned through effort, and what is simply allowed to happen. It's one of the most accurate readings I've found on this specific pattern. Not as a diagnosis, but as a mirror, one that shows the mechanism clearly enough for you to decide what you want to do with it before June truly arrives. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey toward the clarity and genius you deserve. June 2026 will not be a month of movement in a single direction. It will be a month of convergence. 3 fronts of life that have been moving in parallel will begin to meet. The first is about relationships, not just romance. All meaningful connections, work partnerships, friendships that have survived a lot, bonds that became strained and now have room to breathe. June will bring conversations that should have happened months ago, reconnections that will seem too natural to be coincidence, and a new clarity about who is genuinely present in Taurus's life and who has only been taking up space. This will require a disposition that is not natural for this sign, the disposition to be seen, not the shielded Taurus who only shows what has been internally approved. The real Taurus, with uncertainties, desires, and vulnerabilities. Because the relationships that will flourish in June are those that manage to find this Taurus. The second front is that of resources, material, financial, professional, and here something that may seem strange will happen. Opportunities that arrive through a different path than expected, not in the format that Taurus imagined. And for that very reason, running the risk of not being recognized by the filter that was calibrated for the past, not for what is coming. The third front is the most silent and the most powerful, identity, who Taurus is becoming. All that invisible preparation wasn't just circumstantial, it was formative. The version of Taurus that arrives in June is genuinely different from the version that arrived at the beginning of 2025. Denser, more grounded, with a clarity about what matters that only comes from having given up much that didn't matter. This new identity needs to be inhabited, and inhabiting it means acting in accordance with it. But there's a paradox in this whole story, a paradox that Taurus knows well, even if he has never articulated it in words. Taurus is ruled by Venus, the planet of abundance, beauty, and value. And yet is one of the most fascinating aspects of all astrology. Taurus is often the sign that struggles the most to allow itself the abundance that is within its reach. I'm not talking about a lack of talent or effort. I'm talking about something more subtle. The way Taurus, when finally faced with something truly good, finds a reason to wait a little longer, to confirm it once more, to ensure it's real before opening up. Imagine an extraordinary musician who has spent years studying, fine-tuning each note to perfection. At showtime, the moment he's prepared for over the years, he begins to tune once more. Not because the instrument is out of tune, but because tuning is what brought him this far. It's what he knows how to do confidently. Taurus is that musician, and June is the concert. The question that remains is this: at what point do you put down the baton and let the music happen? This musician, who keeps tuning when they should be playing, is one of the hardest patterns to break precisely because it disguises itself as responsibility. And the only effective way to break it is to understand the root cause, not treat the symptom. The digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose, directly addresses Taurus's relationship with self-worth, the external value they create in the world and the internal value they feel for themselves. It accurately shows how these two are often out of sync, how Taurus can build something enormous externally while their inner voice still operates on the logic of, "It's not enough yet." Awaken. It's the most direct guide I've found for anyone on the cusp of a major turning point and truly wanting to cross it. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey toward the clarity and genius you deserve. So what does Taurus need to do when June starts moving? The most honest answer is also the simplest and the most difficult. Taurus needs to learn to distinguish between intelligent caution and elegant self-sabotage. These two things look the same on the outside. Both present themselves as responsibility, as maturity. But inside, they are completely different. Intelligent caution dictates, "I don't have enough information yet. I'll look for more before acting." It's driven by real data, by concrete gaps in the market. In June, every time you find yourself delaying an answer or waiting for another signal, it will be important to ask yourself an honest question. Do I need real information or internal permission? If it's internal permission, and it often will be, the work isn't about seeking more data. It's about granting yourself that permission, consciously, deliberately. There's also something about where Taurus will focus its attention in June. This month's generosity will have direction. It will flow to where Taurus is truly present, not physically present while the mind is calculating risks, truly present. Taurus has an extraordinary capacity for presence when you allow yourself to be, when you are fully immersed in an experience, in a conversation, in a creation, in a decision. There is a quality of attention that few people can match. In June, this ability will be Taurus's most important resource, more than strategy, more than planning. Genuine presence will open doors that analysis alone cannot. And there's one last point, the most delicate one. Taurus will need at some point in June to allow someone to see what has been built, not in a performative way, not for approval, but because some of the opportunities that June will bring only materialize when there is mutual recognition. What June will value is not the finished product, the polished and internally approved version. It's the process, the authenticity of the builder. Be that builder, completely. Everything I've just described, the distinction between genuine caution and self-sabotage, presence as a resource, the vulnerability of the builder, these are changes that don't happen through willpower. They happen when you truly understand your deepest nature and what it's asking of you at this specific moment. The digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose, is exactly that. A compass that doesn't point you where the world says you should go, but where your deepest essence already knows you need to go. It translates the nature of Taurus into a language that goes beyond the sign. It goes to the core of how you process value, how you transform effort into purpose. There is no more useful map than this to navigate what June will bring. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey toward the clarity and genius you deserve. There comes a moment in each life cycle, not a moment marked on the calendar, but an internal, almost imperceptible moment when something stabilizes, when what was being built with so much effort finds its definitive form. Not perfect, never perfect, but real, solid, true. For Taurus, June 2026 has all the makings of being that moment. Not because the planets will resolve what is still pending, but because there is a level of maturity and grounding that Taurus carries today that simply didn't exist before. And maturity recognizes opportunity in a way that inexperience cannot. What was planted in silence was real. What was built in the absence of validation was necessary. What seemed slow to outsiders was the most important growth that could be happening, the kind that goes deep enough to last. June is not a gift, it's a correspondence, a response from the universe to what Taurus has sent over the years in the form of choice, discipline, refusal of what was too easy, and insistence on what was true. You built this, and now, finally, you can live in it.